Hello and welcome to Bizarre Podcast. On today's episode I will be covering Spring Heel Jack, one of my favourite urban legends. And if you happen to like today's episode, would you please consider leaving us a review and subscribing? You can also find us on Twitter, Instagram and Facebook. Just search Bizarre Podcast and look for the logo.
Welcome to Bizarre Podcast.
Let me take you back in time. The place, London, England. The year, 1837. The very same year that Queen Victoria became the Queen of England. At this time, London was going through a population growth due to the Industrial Revolution, which brought people of all different cultures to start a life in the city. The rich lived a privileged life in luxurious homes, whilst the poor lived in filth-ridden slums, where crime was rife among the poorly lit streets. It would be 51 years before murders committed by the famous Jack the Ripper took place in Whitechapel. But long before Jack the Ripper, the streets of London would be plagued by another entity, who also was named Jack. Spring Heel Jack. Unlike Jack the Ripper, Spring Heel Jack did not actually murder anyone. His intent seemed to mainly want to harass or harm his victims. He has been described as many things, including a tall white bull, a ghost, or a fire-breathing demon. Or the more likely explanation, that Jack was indeed a person dressed in oilskin garments, wearing a mask under a hooded face, with eyes that burned red, and sharp steel claws on his fingers that would tear at your skin as he vomited blue flame into your face. The first confirmed sightings of Spring Heel Jack were in London of 1837, but there were a few other reports beforehand that fit Jack's profile. The first story tells of a gentleman walking home late one night. The man was walking past a cemetery when all of a sudden an horrific figure jumped over the cemetery railings that were considerably high and landed right in front of the startled man, who described the figure as a muscular male with devilish features. He had a large nose, pointed ears, and eyes that burned like fire. He then fled the scene, leaving the man unharmed. Shortly later, a barmaid named Polly Adams was found laying unconscious in the street, her clothing half ripped from her body, with gashes to her belly area. When Polly regained consciousness, she described her attacker as a devilish man with large ears and nose, and eyes that burn red. She also commented on claws that ripped the blouse straight off of her body as he fondled her breast with his other hand, whilst tearing at her skin. Another of Spring Heel Jack's victims was a Mary Stevens. Mary was making her way through Clapham Common on her way to work, when suddenly a demonic-looking figure sprang from a dark alleyway. He grabbed Mary whilst trying to kiss her face as he tore at her clothing with his metal claws. Mary managed to let out a loud scream, which caught the attention of people close by, but before help came, the attacker fled the scene. Murray later stated that the attacker's touch was cold and clammy, like that of a corpse. The very next night, not far from where the attack took place on Murray Stevens, Jack sprang in front of a passing horse and carriage, causing the coachman to lose control and crash the carriage, severely injuring himself. Witnesses later reported the demonic figure escaping by springing 9 foot up into the air, right over a high wall, whilst letting out an evil screeching laugh. News of the strange figure soon spread and reached the newspapers, who gave him the name Spring Heel Jack, and the rest is history. Not long after the newspaper reports, the Lord Mayor of London was forced to publicly acknowledge the possible existence of the elusive Spring Heel Jack, although he still remained sceptical. A lot of people believe the tales to be nothing more than a new ghost story that were a dime a dozen in London at the time. But the stories continued, and the next is probably one of the most popular reports of Spring Heel Jack. On this occasion, a dark-hooded figure caught the attention of a young lady named Jane Alsop as he violently rang the doorbell of her home. Jane answered the door to be greeted by a hooded man shrouded in darkness with the help of his cape. He claimed he was a policeman. He spoke clear English and asked Jane to quickly bring him a candle, for he had captured Spring Heel Jack. Jane quickly went inside and grabbed a lit candle and returned to the door. The figure grabbed the candle and seemed to somehow attach it to his chest, illuminating his face, revealing hideous features. He wore a helmet on his head, which sat above fiery red eyes that burned into his sockets. Jane also reported that he was wearing an oilskin garment that was tight-fitting, and as he snarled at her, blue flame shot from his mouth. Jane turned to run inside, but the devilish figure grabbed her and placed her into a headlock and started to rip at her clothing with his metallic claws, as well as tearing clumps of hair from her head, whilst slashing at her arms. Luckily, Jane's sister heard all the commotion and came to Jane's rescue, pulling her back into the house. The cloaked figure continued to ring the bell violently until Jane's father shouted for the police from the window, and the assailant ran away into the night. Just days later, another attack happened in a different part of London, not as widely reported as Jane's encounter, but just as frightening. Lucy Scales and her sister were walking home from their brother's house around 8:30 p.m. As they walked along Green Dragon Alley, they noticed a dark figure appear in front of them. Lucy was walking ahead of her sister as she approached the figure, and noticed he was completely covered by a large dark cape. Without warning, it then spurted blue flame into her face, blinding her and sending her collapsing to the ground, and was overcome with violent fits which continued for several hours. Lucy's brother heard the screams from his home and came running to the scene of the attack to find Lucy's sister holding her in her arms. Spring-Hill Jack was nowhere to be seen. The sister later described the attacker to be tall and thin, dressed like a gentleman, enveloped in a long cape, and carried in front of himself a lamp similar to those carried by the police. After he blew the flame in Lucy's face, he made no attempt to harm either of the sisters, nor did he speak. He just simply turned and walked away. The paper covered these stories and more, as possible copycats started to emerge from the shadows. Spring-Hill Jack quickly became a recurring character in the Penny Dreadful books, where Jack was portrayed as a supernatural figure, or a mysterious criminal, and even a steampunk superhero. Reports of Jack continued to emerge now and again, but gradually started to calm down. The next sighting came about 40 years later, in 1877, at the Aldershot military base. It was late one night, as a sentry on nighttime duty noticed a strange figure advancing towards him from the darkness. The soldier ordered the unknown person to halt, but his orders were ignored. The figure ran up to the soldier and proceeded to slap him around the face. The guard then drew his weapon and shot at the figure with no visible effect, as he sprang high off the ground and bounded into the darkness, leaving the soldier totally bewildered and confused. And finally, the last known appearance was reported in Liverpool in the northwest of England, where Spring-Hill Jack was seen bounding from rooftop to rooftop of an old church. Jack's true identity was never discovered. There have been many theories that maybe he was not one man but many, with a sick sense of humour, or as many believed in 1837, that Jack was indeed the devil himself. Whatever your view of the character is, there is no denying that Spring-Hill Jack caused quite a stir in his day, as mentioned before, appearing in the many Penny Dreadful books, and more cruelly, being the subject of many a child's bedtime story to convince them not to misbehave. These stories and more have become responsible for fueling the urban legend that still lives on today, Spring-Heeled Jack. I'll see you next time. Take care.